Okie dokie. We are going to go over a few things we've noticed as we've done done almost everybody's first observation by now. So kudos to everybody. You're really doing a great job. I hope that you can see how important it is to do a practicum and why the practicum is kind of like where the rubber meets the road and separates these people with this training and these people with this training. Because until you actually do this, um, it's all kind of just theory, right? So great job, everybody. Um, we were talking a little bit about, I'll cover this page and then Jen, I'll hand it over to you. How's that?
Okay,
Um,
sure.
we had some questions about dropping certain parts of the lesson, specifically PA and alphabet. Actually, let me back up. Scratch that. This first bullet point is about dropping parts of the scripts and explanations. Okay, what does this mean? This means you do not have to say, okay, Jennifer, now remember today, this is what we're going to do first. We always do this first. We do our phonemic awareness first. Remember, right? So now I'm going to tell you some sounds. Please don't say that. Just say the sounds. I promise you, many of you have already experienced this. The kid knows the lesson sequence better than you do. Many of them have even many of them have even
True.
said, right? Don't we need to read those back up? Don't we
Yeah.
need to read those, right, Jen? Exactly.
Yeah,
So
it's great. Yeah.
so trust me, they know. I know that you're doing that because you're doing that for yourself. I know you are because you're nervous because you're being filmed and all of that. But it's just too much teacher talk. Got to keep that teacher talk to a minimum. There, so also then, so no extraneous explanations, but also students start to understand, and I'm thinking specifically here about like PG mapping and the spelling section. They start to get to the routine. They know. Now, so as long, and we want them to get to know the routine. We don't want you to have to always be saying, oh, is it a function of content? Or da, 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 da. As long as they follow the steps on their own, they can. So in other words, if you say b, and they say b, and then they say b, and then you say write and name, great. But they can't just say b and then write. They have to still follow the steps. I hope my point is getting clear
Yeah.
here, right?
Yeah.
As long as they're still following the steps on their own, and naming it before they write it and then writing and naming, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We want them to
That's
take some of
really
that ownership.
happening with one of my new little students that's at about the same place where everybody else's is that she's getting so comfortable with the spelling scripts that she's tapping the sound and she's naming the grapheme. So I'm not having to tell her, okay, now tap the sound. So I'm like, it's wonderful. She feels such confidence. But again, she's following every step and I'm making sure she's following every step. And she's been well trained, as many of your practicum students also have been, hopefully all of them. So yeah, it's wonderful. And it just zips along and saves time. It's fantastic. It's exciting to be at this place, a couple of months in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Also, then, speaking of dropping the PA and alphabet. So we've had questions about that. My student has mastered 5 of the sound. Like they can do 5 sounds in blending and 5 sounds of segmenting. Well, are you including long vowel sounds? Would be our question to you. Some of you are not. So remember that we can do things with sounds in PA, even if we haven't taught that grapheme, because it has nothing to do with graphemes. So they're allowed to, for example, tell you the sounds in long A, words with a long A, even though you haven't taught them any long A spellings yet. So please do keep that in mind. I would say the one exception to that would be, I would stay away from the and I would stay away from like in the word
Mhm.
thing or think, right? I would probably stay away from that until you teach that. Because
Yeah.
that's kind of a really nuanced kind of sound going on there. And the way that we segment that might be different than the way you do it in maybe a program that you've been taught. So I would hold off on that one. But otherwise, ask yourself,
Well, the
yep.
only other one, Kara, I'd say are the vowel R's.
Oh, thank you. Of course.
Yeah. Hmm.
Agreed. If you haven't taught the R controlled vowel sounds yet, also don't put those in there. So you can see where there will be a place for those things later, of course. But ask yourself those things. Are you including long vowel sounds, right? And so are they still, can they still, if you throw a long vowel sound in there, can they still do it? Okay. Especially on a
And
word,
I
even
know,
like tray. Sometimes we'll have kids go to or a, right? And they might
mm,
put, because they're thinking about how to spell it. So go ahead, Jen.
yeah, yeah. Um, I was also going to say that I know with some of my trainees, I've specifically told you if I wanted you to go to continue doing it until your second observation. If I didn't tell you to do that, you're welcome to check in with me or with Chrissy. Lauren has just had her baby, so just check in with me. Don't bother Lauren for a little while about potentially dropping it because I can look at your lesson plans and I may let you drop it a little bit sooner.
Perfect. Absolutely.
So.
And check in with me, David, or Carrie also, and we'll give you some guidance on that. We definitely, of course, wanted to see it in your first observation. What about the alphabet section? So, of course, we know that the RAN charts are absolutely the best thing you can do for a kid that needs to just practice automatic, automaticity and with those letter naming. That's the best thing you can do. Then there's also sequencing activities, right? Your initial, medial, final cards and your missing letter cards. Um, so one thing to think about with initial, medial, final cards, and really in just about everything that we do, including PA, are they applying we work on things in isolation so that we see them apply it later. So for example, you might think, oh, they know what initial, medial, final is, but then later when you ask them, what's the final sound in the word stack? Can they tell you that it's k? The whole reason we practice it in isolation is so they apply it. Same with PA. Are they tapping the sounds correctly in the spelling section? Those things should inform each other. Okay. So those are some things to think about. And again, talk to your supervisor, right? Same thing then, of course, with the missing letter cards. We've had a lot of questions about what level should I use? And, should do they have to do this without an alphabet strip? And the idea here, guys, is that, again, in this alphabet section, number one goal is letter naming, accuracy, and fluency, correctly naming it quickly. All these other things we do, like with sequencing, is sequencing important? Yes, it is. But it's not like we have benchmarks available that say, as long as if a student can tell you the 3 letters in a row, given one missing letter within 1 second, then we know there's no outcomes measures here for this. So yes, use the alphabet strip. Teach the student, notice what's happening. When your student has blank YZ, do they go to the end of the alphabet strip to look for that? It's a lot more of observational kind of things that you're seeing, right? Or do they always start back at A? Or do they always have to say the alphabet to tell you the next letter? Those are more of the kinds of things we're looking at there. And there's also not necessarily a science to the levels. I had a trainee who said, well, my kid finds level 2 much harder than level 3. Okay, great. You should work on level 2 then, right? So don't get too caught up in those kinds of things. Anything else on that, Jen?
Well, just I think you shared some information with your people, and I shared slightly different information with mine. I'd ask people to just stay on one level, and I think you were having people do two. One is not necessarily right or wrong. So I
Sure,
just wanted to mention that if you've heard a couple of different things, this is not a
absolutely.
hill to die on.
No,
So, and I just wanted to remind folks that once your student's completely solid with letter naming, and you can drop the RAN chart. I would encourage you just to check in with your supervisor to make sure that's okay. And when they're comfortable with initial, medial, final, I mean, really comfortable. Like my little girl is very comfortable with it. So I just decided last week, I'm going to pull this away and just see how she does with those terms in, transferring those skills. And so then that just leaves me with the missing letter cards. So I'll go through the whole deck. It'll probably take 90 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds. And then I'm just going to go ahead and bank that time. But do remember that if you're at the end of 2 minutes, regardless of what you're doing, you need to stop. So if you've only gone through 3 missing letter cards, then stop and move on to the keyword and sound cards.
absolutely. Those time frames, as you all know, are there for a reason. Keyword and sound cards. It says keep all to use the available time. So in the beginning, we want to make sure we're going through all of those single letter graphemes, right? We want to keep in SHTH when those get taught. We're going to keep in, CK when that gets taught. And you want to get through all the cards. And again, I think it's 2 minutes. Is it 2 minutes or 1 minute for this part?
It's 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, that's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep those cards in there. Use the 2 minutes. Now don't go over the 2 minutes, but
Right.
use those 2 minutes, and you are going to find that eventually you can weed out some of the mastered ones. But guys, you're constantly putting in new ones, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
every time you teach a PGC, there's a card for it pretty much. So, and that's something that never, the keyword and sound card is a part of every single lesson, even when you move to the intermediate lesson plan. So
It's such a powerful tool for assimilation
absolutely.
and connections, and it's activating a different part of your brain because of the keyword itself and the image, the visual of the keyword. Just over the years, I've been amazed at how much kids come to rely on that for assimilation and grasping information and automaticity.
Absolutely. Review words. Double check and make sure that you're scoring this part correctly. Keeping in mind that when we ask you to report accuracy data on the down read, as this child reads down the list, that's when we want the accuracy data. And an accurately read word there is one that is instantly recognized. If your student has to stop and sound out each individual sound, even if they then blend it together, that is not an automatically recognized word. I mean, it's great that they're using the things that we've taught them to as one strategy to get to accurate orthographic mapping, right? That's our end goal for all of our kids. But please know that it's just going down the list. Now, when they read back up, I like to make a check mark just so I know, okay, they read it back up. And even the heterogeneous, you can make another check mark if you want to. But the data is on the down read. Wonder words, only included on review lists if the student can't read them. If you do include them on a word list, it must be in a phrase. Remember, these wonder words are, for the most part, function words, which means they don't have a lot of meaning outside of what they're doing in a sentence. Their function is to connect the content words. So even, for example, the ones that we gave you already to use for the to be verb, right? We don't just put are, is, am, was, were. We say they are, we are, she was, I am. Even that small, phrase. But even if you were going to review words like of or from or whatever, you would want to put, you want to put that word in a phrase. And again, most of our kids can read these words. What is it that they wonder about? They wonder why they're spelled the way they are. So use that review list for a concept, a different concept, like a phoneme grapheme correspondence, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, it's rare that you're going to have the wonder words as part of your review. Occasionally, we specifically ask you to do it, and as Kara just stated, if your child is having trouble reading it, then include it. But it is rare.
all right, Jen, you want to do PG mapping?
Oh, sure. Hey, Kara and I decided that 12 phonemes is sometimes too much, especially if you need to work on letter formation in the PG mapping section. So we're going to ask, and this is literally brand new as of yesterday, that you do a minimum of 8 phonemes. See how well the child is doing and check the time, determine if you need to have some letter formation practice. And if that's the case, then use the remainder of the time for that. You're still welcome to do 12 phonemes, plan for 12 phonemes, but have your primary 8, the most important ones in those first 8. And we just feel like that's going to go better. With my student and with Stella, we're like, wow, it is so hard to get through 12 sounds. Some process faster, and especially as we have multiple graphemes for a particular phoneme, it does get a little more complicated and the answers are a little longer and it may actually take more time for your student. We're still aiming, and you have 3 minutes in that section. Hopefully letter formation is looking pretty good with most kids. But just wanted you to be aware that we are making that little change there. A reminder, we did see constant clusters with observation 1. Some of you were trying to put clusters in phonemes in the PG mapping. It's individual phonemes. So you're not doing hull or skr. You're doing and and s. But those are all individual phonemes because we know consonant clusters are 2 and 3 phoneme sounds. Anything else, Kara?
Nope.
Okay. Oh, I would also say, remember, please utilize your you've got the responses in your practicum log under, I think, just PG mapping under that tab. You should be updating that every time you add a new phoneme and grapheme, or every time you add a new grapheme. Everything that you are to say, that the child is to say, and that the child is to write, and that you are to plan is in that tab. So you're not going to mess up as long as you're using that master document. Okay. Spelling. Oh yes. Doggone it. We unfortunately there's some curricula where consonant clusters are treated more like a digraph or a trigraph. We know, as I just said, that they are individual phonemes for each of those graphemes, even when they're a cluster. Unfortunately, some of your schools have adopted curricula where they don't teach it that way. So they're trying to have SCR be just one unit. Well, for those of you that are experiencing that, you can see how messed up that is for your students. The difficulty that they're having in identifying individual phonemes because they've been taught that that's a cluster or a single unit. Kara and I just so strongly disagree. That information is 100% incorrect. And in order for a child to hear those individual phonemes and successfully apply it to their spelling, especially, they have to do every sound. So they need to segment them completely. So you may need to talk to a tier 1 teacher. You may need to talk to the reading interventionist, whatever, but we want you to separate all those phonemes. You may have to provide more guidance though, because they have been taught in such a manner that we've got to take 3 steps back to help them to move forward. And so you may be taking the lead more. You may be doing more scaffolding with sound circles, guiding them more. It will take a while for some children to kind of break that habit and to understand that they're individual phonemes. So we are going to insist that you do it the way we know is 100% correct. Anything you want to add to that? Actually,
Nope.
anybody? Okay. Okay. Reminder then for observation 2, there's going to be a few things that are added that you did not need to do for observation 1. One is you're going to teach your first suffix. You're going to teach S and ES, and that means we're going to have complex words. A base plus that affix creates a complex word. So you must include at least one complex word in spelling. You're also going to want to include some in dictation too. And you're going to have to include one wonder word also in your spelling. Now, some of you had the opportunity and did do a wonder word for observation 1, and I was so proud of you, and you did so well. But you must do it for observation 2 and every observation here on after. Realize, because we're getting more complexities within our spelling, you have lesson scripts for each of these scenarios. So when you just started out, initially, you only had simple, script number 1, scenario number 1 for a simple word. But now you have a wonder word, and you also have a complex word where the spelling does not change, like the doubling rule or the replace rule. So you're going to have 3 different scripts that you're looking at depending on the type of word that you're having the student spell. So you must be solid in your mind. If you're having the child spell were, W-E-R-E, that is a wonder word. You need to use the wonder word scenario. I think it's script number maybe 2, or maybe it's
I
number
think it is
3.
maybe 2, and then complex is
Yeah.
3 with no spelling
So
changes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, it is. And then 4 is complex with spelling changes, and 5 is 2-syllable bases. So you need to have that awareness, and you need to make sure you're asking the child the correct question. And that, of course, is laid out in those scenarios. Okay, dictation. Let's see. Remember, this is where we can really see what the student knows and what they need to work on because we're not preventing errors. Yes, so we know we've got some great strategies for the student to hold the information in their working memory, the information, of course, being the sentence that they're about to dictate. And then once they start, we are being quiet. Um, so we're wanting them to have the opportunity to apply everything they know about expressive writing when they're dictating their sentences. This is also such an amazing opportunity for them to self-edit. Most of the time, they're not going to have an adult sitting there with them. Oh, honey, you need to capitalize. Oh, sweetie, check that spelling of that word, you know. So we want them to really get good. That I don't think that was grammatically correct, but to become confident in using COPS, in understanding what those what the acronym means and checking those different pieces, those mechanics associated with spelling. Um, this is another reason why you've got to watch your time, because by the time you get to dictation and then to oral reading, if you've not used your time wisely, this dictation part may be really rushed. Kara, does the next page talk all about, we talked so much about
Sure
dictation.
does.
Okay, very good. So you can go ahead and let's
Okay,
see, you
sure,
can
great.
hop back.
So
Do you want
speaking
to
of,
go
well,
ahead?
just, yeah, this one I think is a duplicate accidentally.
Let
Yeah,
me see.
that's a duplicate of what we just said
Okay,
down here. So I'm just skipping that one. Okay, yeah.
okay. Yeah,
Jen just
you
said
want to
it.
jump?
The timing here is real. You've got 8 minutes, but if you've taken up, multiple extra minutes other places, this is the hardest thing for kids to do is written expression. And it's also where you get the best bang for your buck in terms of you as a instructor. You can really see what they can and cannot do. It all comes out in writing, right? Because sometimes we can read words, but we can't write them, spell them. And so this is just, and we know that writing instruction reinforces reading, improves reading, but it's not necessarily the other way around, right? So please do not shortchange this part. Our advice to you is to try to get the required concepts that you need to include within the first 2 sentences. Why? Because you might run out of time for the third. And if your wonder word is hanging out in sentence number 3, but you don't get to it, you don't get credit for it because your kid didn't spell it. Okay, so as you can see here, we want 3 new concept words. Again, not in each sentence, within those 2 sentences between them together, we want 3 new concept words. We want 2 review words at least, because there's 2 concepts that are getting reviewed, and we want 1 wonder word at least. That's the criteria here. Now, if more happen, great, but try to get those things into those first 2 sentences but of course, you're going to plan 3 sentences because you have to watch as your student is writing those sentences. After you've dictated them, after you've helped them practice them to keep them in their working memory, they're going to write those sentences. You should not be sitting there just on your phone. You should be watching what your student has written. You will be able to tell exactly what errors they have made, which is what it says right here. Note the errors made on the student's first attempt here. Of course, the sentences would be written right here. They're just not in there. I just screenshotted this right from the lesson plan. You should be making notes about what happened here so that you go, oh gosh, he made 4 spelling errors just in sentence number 1. I obviously cannot give sentence number 3 because you have to save time for error correction. Okay? If many errors are made in the first 2 sentences, don't give the third one. Guys, this is highly dependent on your child. Jen and I talked a lot about this, well, maybe by 5 minutes they need to be done with this, and by 3. No, we can't really give you those guidelines very well because it so much depends on your student. And you could have a student that has no errors on Monday's lesson, but has 5 errors on Wednesday's lesson. We never know what is going to be the concept that trips up a kid, right? It's really dependent on each individual lesson. And if they wrote a sentence, we expect you to have them edit that sentence. Okay, Jen?
Yeah, just remember, no 2 errors are created the same. If it's just a
Mm,
capitalization error, that's going to be
mm,
quick.
mm-hmm.
If it's a major spelling error, that could potentially take some time, especially if you've got to share a concept card or a keyword and sound card and things like that. Um, oh, there was one other thing I was going to say. Um, and now I can't remember what it was.
I'll let you think about it because I've remembered one thing I wanted to
Okay.
say. When you're prompting your student, guys, what did we just do in the section before this? We spelled individual words and we helped the student try to think about the routines that they should be thinking about. If I'm going to spell a word, I need to know if it's a content word, or I need to know if it's simple or complex. Number one, I have to know if it's simple or complex. I have to know how it's built. Then I need to know if it's a wonder word or a content word. And whether the answers to those questions are decision points and lead me down a certain path. So you could be using those same prompts to help your student find their errors here. If they're trying to spell the word dogs and they misspelled it, your questioning should be the same questioning that you use in the spelling section. Well, is it simple or complex? Number one, okay, it's complex. What does that mean I do? I could make a word sum. Yeah. So you're really, I hope you're seeing that we
Yeah.
try not to think about these lesson parts as being so isolated, right? Why do we practice phoneme grapheme mapping right before we spell words? Because that's what we want kids to be thinking about in the base element. What are the phoneme grapheme correspondences? Right? So I hope you're seeing this fluidity of like there are reasons why we do things the way we do them. And it's to help the kid to see, first of all, how the whole system works, and also teaching them to not be so reliant on us. We want them to internalize these questions, simple or complex, wonder word or content word, right? Because that determines what I do with that word in order to spell it correctly.
And I remembered what I was going to say, and it
I
segues
knew you
perfectly that
would.
well, sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. The COPS is looked at first by the student.
Oh,
You you must have them walk through it. You are not, okay, C's capitalization, let's look, back off. I know that's hard for so many of us with these teacher hearts. They've got to take the lead on it as much as they are able. And 8 weeks later, they should be more and more comfortable and confident. So back off when the student is editing. Let them do the editing. And that's why we have a little checklist on the side. We just added that this year. Okay, let me see my C's capitalization. Yep, I have, okay, check. So that was very purposeful. Really, everything we do is very well thought out and extremely purposeful. Honestly, every second of your lesson. So yeah, back off. And then when the teacher guides, as Kara just said, use some of those great questions. Like, okay, no, oh, it's a complex word. Well, how was it built? Oh, okay, what would the base be? So guide them. But I've loved, I've not seen people in general just giving them the answers or really rushing the kids. So realize
same.
this is one of the most powerful parts of our lesson, really an opportunity to see what the kids can do.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, and
Last section.
I'm gonna stop. The last
Go
one is
ahead.
oral reading, and we already talked to y'all about that at our last
Oh
section,
yeah.
at our last session. We talked about those changes to the timing and making sure. I see people who aren't doing any intervention at all. They're just going from one timing to the next. The whole point is to do the intervention, right? So just be aware of that and thinking about intervention selection based on the data. Again, you can't necessarily use the same intervention every time. Why? Because it's completely dependent on that reading, that day, that
Mhm.
kid. How did they read that passage? Okay, then I can decide, right,
Yeah.
what intervention I might choose.
And if you do have a student that really has not been making very many errors, the great news is you're going to get into more complicated concepts. So hopefully you're going to be able to build some more complicated sentences so there will be more errors. I mean, not that's what we like, but actually we do because that gives the
Right?
child a chance to learn, that gives us a chance to see you using the intervention strategies. Reminder, in your practicum log, those high frequency word lists and the known words for spelling, all of those that your child has read or that has an asterisk next to it can be used in your spelling sentence, excuse me, in your oral reading. So please use those. My little one can do though and even and after and water and because and some more complicated words. So I'm also building more complicated sentences, like a complex sentence. Even though the people were angry, they still won first place, or something like that was one I did the other day. So you can make the sentences more complex. You can do a compound, and using some of those known words for reading also are going to be helpful.
Great. Anyone want to add anything else? Well, okay, great. That's a good place to stop it, I think. Thanks, everybody.